Welcome. Thank you all for sticking around. The last panel of the day on the future of AI. Exciting topic. My name is Jessica Grootman. I am an independent industry analyst. I'm also a principal analyst with Tractica Research, specializes in AI. And I do a lot of work on deep learning as well as blockchain. So I'm excited to be here today to talk about the future of AI. And I want to get started with just some short introductions. So I'd love for each of the panelists to take, let's say, no more than a minute and tell us about what you all do and just kind of your context within the AI space.
My name is Moataz Rashad. I'm the founder and CEO of DeepView. DeepView is a startup based in Berkeley. We're focused on AI for supply chain intelligence and optimizing margins for manufacturers. We are an SAP partner for supply chain, and we work with manufacturers globally.
Hello, I'm Carrie Solinger. I'm with IDC. I'm an industry analyst. I work in the cognitive AI systems as well as content analytics, including rich media, and also data providers and brokers. Just to give you a little bit of background, I know I only have probably 15 more seconds, but I've been with IDC for just over a year, come from a more academic background where I was working on publications and projects involving natural language processing and machine learning and on predictive analytics. So.
Thank you. So my name is Bill Reichert, and I'm Managing Director of Garage Technology Ventures. Garage is a seed and early stage venture capital fund. We invest in two guys in a garage or two gals in a garage or guy and a gal, whatever the case may be. That's our focus. I did my first AI investment back in 1989. I have been a long-time AI enthusiast, and you know that's a really tough position to take, right? So my first AI investment was 1989. My most recent, one of my partners, we just invested in one 2 weeks ago. So in that span, there's been a lot of ups and downs in the industry, and I'll look forward to having that conversation this afternoon.
Hello, I'm Michael. I work for a company called Prudential. We're a financial services provider who's active globally, and I lead all our machine learning and AI activities.
All right, thank you. Now, I want to get started today by first conceptualizing what is future of AI, because I think we probably all have different definitions of that. So the question for the panel is, where are we now, and what are your distinct kind of individual visions for where this is going, for what a future would look like? Not that it's a destination, but how you envision a future. When will we, maybe put differently, kind of go from, on the enterprise side, just tweaking business processes to really transforming business models? We can just go down the line. That works.
Okay. Who wants to start? Let's get the PhD first.
I actually did drop out of Stanford around the same time the Google founders dropped out, so I'm that old. But I find it hard to predict points in time, given we're humans and AI is about enabling the neural networks to predict, right? So as an AI technologist, I shouldn't predict, right? But just to comment, I think at least I can only speak for manufacturers since these are the companies we're focused on. Every executive, C-level, S-level at a manufacturer realizes the importance of AI, deep learning, machine learning. There is not a single executive who hasn't heard of this or hasn't realized that they need to adopt these technologies. They are just thinking right now and scrambling to find out what to do and how to start. And do you build a local team, or do you partner out, or do you do a combination, and so forth? So I think the realization already happened in the market. It's the thinking process right now and how fast, and of course the agility varies by size of company and geography and so forth. And then it's the chaos period of what should we do? Do we hire 3 PhDs and get started that way, or do we partner and it's the build versus buy decision and so forth? So I think we're in that stage right now.
I'd have to agree with my friend over here. There's no way to really pinpoint it. I know we'd all love for it to be not necessarily be Westworld, you know, where they take over. But I mean, that's something that's, you know, light years away. But right where we're at right now is, yes, everyone is realizing that it's something that they need to get involved in and what they need to do. But it's a matter of how to get involved and the steps they need to take. And I know we'll address that specific question a little bit later in the panel. But where I think that AI in the near-term future is going is it's the idea and the need to productize AI platforms. It's it's where we need to start looking at the data and the business intelligence side that we've all grown to know and love and rename with the databases and the data repositories, and start looking at it from the perspective of implementing these AI platforms where you're enabling not just the subject matter experts or the developers or the programmers to handle this, you know, a handful of them to handle this information for data that they're going to analyze and draw insights and obtain recommendations. You're going to need to be able to enable people who are very, I guess, the general workforce, individuals who don't have this specific skill set, to be able to do the same thing. So it's a larger population that's going to have access to this information, but be able to do the same things that these skilled individuals are currently doing at this time.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to disagree with my esteemed colleagues here, because I think we can make some very definitive, specific predictions about the future of AI. Based on my experience in this, at least two definitive predictions. One is that all of our enthusiasms in all the different domains of AI, whether it's voice and speech or autonomous or deep learning, all of those applications will take longer than we expect or think or hope, right? Yep. So that was a cheap prediction, right? So the second cheap prediction, guaranteed, that what turns out to be most compelling or exciting or dominant 5 to 10 years from now will probably be something less exciting than what we think today. That, you know, the hype around what we're excited about today, probably AI, I think, is going to sneak up on us and become common and prevalent in other aspects of our lives, the way the internet has, the way mobile has, and that we didn't quite expect, and that may take further thinking. My third less cheap prediction, I don't know, maybe it's cheap or not, but I'm not sure if it's certain, is I think AI will become increasingly invisible over time. I think that it will become simply a tool inherent in our infrastructure rather than a thing unto itself. And so for me as an investor, my challenge is how do you invest in AI? Because I'm not sure AI is a thing that you can invest in. AI is something that gets implemented in a whole bunch of different ways. And long ago and far away, you know, a possible analogy, in the olden days, there was a time in the valley here where the next hottest thing was called multimedia, and the really big idea is, could you imagine, you know, developing software applications that, you know, included things like images and video and sound and voice, and that was multimedia. That was so exciting. But you couldn't really invest in multimedia per se. I mean, there were some tools, but that became sort of trivial compared to the application of the tools. So prediction number 3 is that AI will sort of disappear. It will become part of our sort of underlying toolkit.
Predictions are hard, especially about the future. But the last bit I can actually agree with. I have 3 sort of separate predictions. One very much sort of on the technology side, and that is that we'll finally have tools on how to apply kind of techniques that, like deep learning, but not only that, to unsupervised learning problems. And I think that's going to be the really hard problem, and that's going to keep researchers busy for the next 10 or 20 years. But that once we have that breakthrough, I think that we will all of a sudden be faced with a completely different paradigm. The second one is picking up where Bill took us, and that's sort of the ubiquity. I think the frameworks that were on the top line of the last slide of the previous speaker that enable us to all of a sudden apply deep learning in a way that even idiots like me or something like that can just write a couple of lines of code and make it work. That will change everything, and that will lead to AI becoming like electricity. There's no point talking about that your widget contains electricity. Of course it does. How otherwise would it work? In the same way, of course it contains AI. Why would you want to have anything that doesn't? And that ubiquity will be enabled by increasingly simplified tool sets and frameworks. And I think that's a very, very exciting area to watch. And the third prediction really comes from, it's kind of a consequence of the second. The third is that for the first time, companies will look at AI not just as sort of part of hype or something like that, which is sort of excusable at this stage, but more than just some simple way to get more cost out of a business process or treat your customers in a better way or find that next prospect for that widget you're trying to sell slightly easier, whatever it is. But all of a sudden we'll realize that AI will enable them to really transform the way they need to think about their business as a whole. And for the first time, we'll have companies that have closed feedback loops, learn from the things that they're actually doing, and not having to institutionalize some kind of knowledge sharing or learning programs that are based on human learning behaviors, which of course never really happens. So for the first time, we'll have companies that are effectively closed feedback loops that bring the real experience of the production line or of the customer experience, whatever it is, to a closed loop and learn from that. And I think it's those three areas, one more technical, one more esoteric, and the third one visual thinking around companies actually doing something interesting.
Indeed, it's interesting how when a technology begins to work, it becomes more invisible. We think of it more as infrastructure, right? And I think AI, that is especially the case for AI, but also IoT, and as we have seen with social media, for example, is sort of now table stakes in terms of a communications program. I want to look at the landscape of this market, which I think is really interesting compared to some other technology markets. You have giant technology vendors really paving the way with their massive data sets and their incredible computer processing power. Startups and innovators who are more agile, but also relying on open source frameworks. You have academics who are doing tremendous amounts of research. And so the question that I want to pose to the panel is where you all see this market going and really evolving. I mean, look at MySpace, look at Netscape. These were market leaders at one point. Will Google's and Facebook's and Microsoft's and Amazon's, et cetera, NVIDIA's be the leaders in this space 5-10 years from now? Do you see voids for startups to be filling? I'd just be curious how you see this ecosystem sort of unfolding over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, I'll jump in because I am highly anxious on this topic about sort of the cycles of disruption. And at least today, I don't know tomorrow or yesterday, but today I think we have a risk of oligopolistic control of our advanced technologies. And so everybody, there's sort of an instinct here in the Valley to say, oh, no, because, we, entrepreneurs, they can disrupt and they can knock out the giants. But back in the day, the giants weren't here in Silicon Valley, right? They were these legacy lumbering dinosaurs, right? And so we had this conversation earlier today around voice, around speech to text, right? So So in the olden days, 98, 99, 2000, arguably IBM had the most advanced technology, Dragon Speak, speech to text, and they were the smartest guys on the planet. And then along came all of these Silicon Valley startups, all these startups, not just Silicon Valley, but all these startups that were doing speech to text. And this company named Nuance seems to have won at some level. And now Nuance is the goddamn giant, right? I'm sorry, is there anybody from Nuance in the room? I should. So we'll see. Now, and interesting, there's a funny couple of characteristics around this AI deep learning stuff. One is you have a disproportionate advantage if you have access to infinite amounts of data. And so, God bless, there are these third-party sources of infinite data, maybe, that will help us, the entrepreneurs, compete with the Googles. But Googles and Amazons and these guys, they have this unbelievable unfair advantage. And the other aspect nobody talks about is that these companies are different in structure, to your point. They're different in structure than the old dinosaur legacy companies that we disrupted. Because all of our new generation monopolies, whatever, oligopolies, they are ecosystem companies by definition. So Google and Apple and Amazon, they aren't stovepipe companies. They build on top of thousands or tens of thousands of other companies that depend upon them to reinforce and reinforce their oligopolistic position in their respective markets. So I worry that in this new world of innovation, ironically, we've become more rigid in the structure of our corporate dominance, and that it's going to be harder to disrupt this generation than it was to disrupt the last generation, because worst case, they just co-opt, absorb, and acqui-hire you, and then they just become stronger. So that's I'm not sure I want to be public about the fact that I'm worried about this conspiracy of the giants, but I think it's something that could relate to the future of AI and this technology.
It is very ironic.
I mean, sort of, yeah. Point. Anybody want to knock me off that one?
I'll take that.
Okay, all right, you go for it.
Okay. Wow, so much to absorb there. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I knew NSA was spying on us from the very beginning, way back, before we had cell phones and everything. I'm like, they're listening in, keywords, let's drop them in, in the conversation. But I don't necessarily believe that there's a conspiracy out there of this, building up the big three, with Amazon and Google and Facebook. I think what their business model is very smart. They're staying at the top and following these trends and trying to stay ahead of them to their benefit, which I think a lot of companies in the past that are no longer existent or kind of have become less prominent, they fell behind. They were very complacent in what they were doing and where they're where they're in the market. And at this point, going back to what I was saying with that these companies now that are leading the industry, they understand that there are these startups, yes, primarily based in this area. It seems like there's like a new NL, like natural language or machine learning startup every day. They keep an eye on the industry. They keep an eye on who's doing what, and they end up purchasing and buying out these companies. It's like with the buyout of TensorFlow, and the one comes to mind, and of course everything else just went out. But they're absorbing these technology and they're often taking what they're able to from these different companies and incorporating it into their new products. And like I had mentioned before, they're beginning to productize all of these different machine learning, AI platforms. But some of them are also buying companies and just letting them sit there and not do anything. So I think in that way, that is different than what we'd seen before. Would you like
So you
to?
actually agree with me? I'm not saying that they're conspiring actively. I think it's, I'm not saying they're conspiring actively. I think it's structural or systemic, the way they exist in the marketplace versus the way the previous generation of dinosaurs, exists. So, but basically, it sounds like you're agreeing with me that they have this unfair advantage, which is going to change. You're saying they're smarter because they pay attention. I don't think I don't think IBM wasn't paying attention. I don't think IBM was complacent. I think IBM was trapped in sort of an innovator's dilemma, whatever. But, and they're not dead yet either.
Just to know, I didn't say IBM.
No, no. Yeah. I know. They're one of your big clients, and you want to make sure you don't disparage. But I apologize. That was terrible. But no, I said IBM. She did not say IBM.
For the record.
So I'm sorry.
So a comment is not agreeing or disagreeing, right? So in principle, I don't think any company is invincible. I mean, I wouldn't be an entrepreneur if I thought the big guys can be taken down, right? I think the differentiator with the four horsemen or whatever you want to call them, some say three, right? I think it's four, is actually the data set. The differentiator is these massive data sets they've built. The obvious case, of course, Facebook, 1.7 billion profiles, right? Google with all the search traffic. Amazon on the commerce graph, right? So, and that's why they open source some of them. Amazon doesn't open source a lot, but Google and Facebook open source a lot of stuff. Why? Because they actually want to share algorithms, so they get algorithms back because they know their data set is the treasure, right? But that doesn't mean that there is a hold on the market that they have, and somebody can still build a massive company that does something around them and still gather a very valuable data set, which is what we're trying to do on the manufacturing side, right? So I think they're not invincible. If you want to compete with them, you can still do it if you find the right investor, right? And I think they do contribute to the AI space, obviously, by opening up some algorithms and some packages and encouraging the ecosystem and, of course, acquiring and so forth. So, yeah, and I do agree that they are smarter than the previous generation in that they are paying attention more closely and they are run by smarter people, in my opinion, right? They're my generation.
You want to chip in?
Do not want to get involved.
Safer enough.
I have no data.
Yeah.
I remember what kind of models I built and on what kind of infrastructure I built them before those big companies came along, and I'm really glad they're here.
One of the dynamics I see is, and I'm not sure how it'll play out from an ecosystem perspective, is the role of academia, not only from a research perspective, but from one of the horsemen, perhaps, this massive void of talent and people who actually know how to do this. Microsoft's acquisition of Maluba this week was a big research acquisition. DeepMind was obviously a big research acquisition. So there may be something cooking in terms of partnerships from a talent perspective, from a research perspective, that will influence, both startups or maybe what goes from academia to startup and then goes to large technology vendors. Speaking of challenges, I wanted to ask the panel, what do you all see as, let's say, your biggest challenge facing the AI market in the next couple of years? This can be technical, this can be structural, governance related, ethical. Everything's fair game. Biggest challenge. Whoever wants to go first.
So from my perspective as an investor, there are two huge challenges. So the first one is to figure out who the hell is going to win from the front end. So as a seed and early stage investor, these extraordinary teams bubble up. So by the way, my thesis about the new world does not suggest that innovation won't happen. It doesn't suggest that entrepreneurs should not start up companies. I totally believe there's huge opportunities to do that. I'm just, I'm not sure that's going to result in the disruption of the big guys. But so I think there's a ton of innovation opportunity and investment opportunity, but in this particular domain, the nature of the tools is such that so many people are jumping on this bandwagon so quickly. The comment earlier about another NLP company being launched and funded every day, right? I mean, it's amazing. So how does an investor figure out, who to invest in, who's going to win? And then once we invest, then the second big challenge. The second big challenge is every time we invest in something cool that we think is unique and compelling and has an unfair advantage, all of a sudden there are 10 venture-backed competitors that, that have been launched, not just here in the Valley, but, on the East Coast and, in China and in Berlin or whatever, right? And so, from an investor, huge challenges, participating in all of this.
It's my turn again. Not going to argue with him. He is an expert in the VC world. Kind of going to Jessica's point about the challenges in terms of integrating academia. I think we've all seen that, and I'm a little biased. Like I said, I have a background in academia. I think we're seeing that a lot of, in the academic world, there was a lot of projects and research that was looking at what we're calling and AI and cognitive and with a lot of the VR systems to Oculus. I remember we were super excited, I think it was 5 years ago when we got one, and it was expensive, and now they're giving them out for free. I think there is a shorter gap now in between, and we need to recognize that, and we need to look toward academia or the research. But there's a shorter gap between the crossover from the research side and the studies that are being done, and it coming into more mainstream and going into the private markets. And I believe that if we're not paying attention in that world, and integrating more of the research side, businesses and vendors and organizations are going to be in a lot of trouble. So that is one of the challenges I think that the industry as a whole faces in understanding how to not just do open source and not just support, foster a specific community, but realizing that there is a lot of crossover and there's cross disciplines and everything's converging. So that needs to be addressed, and that needs to be understood how we're going to integrate that so that there's a smoother transition.
I actually think the risk going forward is that the companies are draining up academia. They're just hiring all the professors one after the other. It's amazing what happened over the past 18 months. We have a professor right here who just spoke. With all the poaching that's happened, Google, Facebook, Baidu, and so forth, it's just unclear who's going to graduate the next rising stars. There's definitely.
Didn't you say you dropped out?
Oh, I dropped out in '97, so I don't count. I do want masters and PhD level people in machine learning to hire, and it's incredibly hard to hire in the Bay Area. It is actually a really bad place to be in the Bay Area right now if you want to hire deep learning people. I kid you not, because you are competing with the Four Horsemen, Uber. It's like there is at least 10 companies who can outbid you, 3x to 1, and then all the other startups that we refer to, right? So it's there is a gridlock in the talent recruitment space right now.
Hence the emergence of China. as all our innovation over the next couple of decades will come from that part of the world.
All of it? All of it?
All the exciting stuff.
Ooh, there's a prediction. Wow.
I'll throw in a challenge into the bucket, which is, I think, a cultural one. My background's actually in anthropology, and I can't unsee a lot of, well, I shouldn't say I can't unsee because we haven't seen them yet. A lot of the consequences, the ethical implications of virtual assistants, being able to digitize everything, you know, does the autonomous car choose the cliff or the person or the old lady, et cetera, these classic conundrums. There's no precedent for this. Never mind if we do get laws on the books, how to actually enforce them. So I would like to open that question up of where you all see some of the most important, stickiest ethical or maybe beneficial, societally beneficial ethical implications as well as cultural, cultural implications for this technology, particularly since we're talking future.
I'm going to go first this time. I think one of the concerns that I am seeing in this industry, especially with these virtual assistants, these chatbots, is there is a move to hide that. There is a jump to, with not completely and totally, but there are some companies out there and some services that are being offered where they're providing assistance. And the people don't know and that they're actually talking to a chatbot, or they're interacting with something that is a machine as opposed to a person. And so in terms of from an ethical standpoint, that bothers me, that worries me, that is something that's going to come up in kind of bite them in the butt. But at the same time, there is that point that not a lot of people want to interact with necessarily a machine. But there's a lot of comments and concerns that, like, oh, I want this human experience. But there also have been studies that show that when given a choice, some individuals prefer to talk to an automated system because they're just like, it'll go faster, and then I won't have to deal with the human and the different errors they could possibly make. So my concern is from that specific standpoint, we have to decide what is acceptable and what's not. Are we going to be deceiving individuals? Are we going to be deceiving the customers or the clients? And what kind of, there are no actual best practices or guidelines currently that that are established at this point. So specifically, that is one of my concerns. I'm sure Bill has plenty of comments, so I'll go ahead and pass the mic directly to him.
Are you calling me opinionated? Is that?
No, not at all.
So actually, I think a lot of the talk around AI and the dangers and threats and scary things about AI are way, 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 way overblown. I mean, I think, when it comes to privacy, boy, that ship has sailed, right? That ship sailed a long time ago. It's just stunning how many emails get bounced around with all sorts. And not to mention Facebook. The whole privacy ship is so far gone that yes, AI will contribute to it. It will contribute more intimate data being collected that can possibly leak out, and so, but it's not like it's all of a sudden, a new problem that we have to worry about. It's, the other aspect that I think is legitimate for, anyone who has kids. You have this, I have this anxiety around, clearly the brain gets wired differently if you spend your time privately interacting with a machine. In the olden days, my parents worried about me watching TV, right? Because, oh my God, right? And, so look how I turned out, and that you can go either way on that one. But, I see my kids being wired a little bit differently, and I do worry. I don't know if you can measure it. I do worry about the true EQ of of children, young adults coming up, learning social interaction from a machine. And I see, you know, I love Jibo. I don't know if anybody has seen the Jibo demos. We haven't seen a lot of the machines shipped yet. But, you know, these social robots that, you know, are coming down the pike. And they're adorable. I mean, and they would be, you can see, they're going to be totally addictive, I think. I think we're going to have these addictive experiences in the same way that, you know, the last generation, i.e. 5 years ago, was addicted to Grand Theft Auto or whatever, right? You know, maybe, I guess that was Minecraft, and then 10 years ago was Grand Theft Auto, and then whatever, right? All the way back to Pong. So, so we have these addictive machine technology, we have these addictive technologies that are going to get more and more and more addictive. Now, it's possible that you could develop more EQ with AI than we've ever seen in the past, or it's possible it'll develop a sort of, you know, unbalanced personality. I don't know. Do we need more unbalanced people in this world? So I'm less worried about sort of the legal, you know, side of things. I also think the whole we're going to lose all jobs thing is overblown. I think there's so many forces that are going to be so much more dramatic, affecting our employment, jobs, creation, economic platform than AI or even technology broadly. I think there's a factor there. I think net technology innovation will improve economic development and jobs, not hurt. So I'm on that side of that particular debate. But so that's kind of where I am on all
this. I think the ethical implications are fascinating, and I think we actually, as society, we have a duty to take initiative on that. I don't think we should just leave it to governments, especially tomorrow. But I seriously think that we should have a partnership between the industry stakeholders and civic society, and NGOs that start thinking about exactly situations like Jessica alluded to on autonomous cars, right? You know, do you hit sacrifice the old lady so that you don't damage your car or whatever, right? And there is a lot more in that. In fact, you know, in my talk, it's just talked about automated forklifts in factories, right? I mean, factory workers are not getting paid that much. You may have decisions there to make. So I think that needs to be front and center for a lot of people in society, and not just assume that the DMV will handle this in an intelligent way, you know. Have you actually talked to, I hope nobody here is from the DMV. Have you actually talked to people who work at the DMV? The second question on privacy, I mean, I grew up in Alexandria, right? The original one, not Virginia, right? So, so I just assumed growing up that there's always somebody listening, right? And then I emigrated to the US to study AI, by the way, and then I stopped because it was BS, and then it became again, right? And I just assumed that whenever I'm emailing and texting somebody, there's somebody sniffing. And I don't know if it's the good guys or the bad guys, however your definition of the bad guys are, right? So then, you know, I never really worried about privacy because just assumed it was taken, you know, and then we realized it actually was taken, right? So I think I definitely agree with Bill that that privacy, you just assume it's gone, right? Whether we have AI ubiquitous or semi, or you know, only in certain areas, right? But I think the ethical implications do require thought and contribution from everyone in their own capacity. So,
when I look at this from the point of view of a financial services provider, so and I don't actually understand where a lot of the sort of ethical dilemmas come from and why they are seen in the way that they are seen. Because actually I see it almost 180 degrees the other way. I think AI will enable us to serve our customers in a way that is not just regulatory compliant as it's never been before. It's never been achievable by human efforts. but also it will be able to we'll be able to extend that to a population that never enjoyed those kind of benefits that we've seen, that we've been able to offer before. Most of us sitting here in this part of the world are thinking about the world as if it was just the 500 million or so people who are enjoying all the comforts of the developed world. But for the first time, AI will enable us to offer products and services to the remaining 6.5 billion people of mankind that we just cannot serve with current approaches. And I think that is a major game changer. I think if you think that it's not just from a financial services company point of view, but also if you think about what happened when famous AlphaGo was deployed, as Google has publicized a couple of weeks or whatever, months or whatever it was ago, when they applied the AlphaGo approach to power consumption in their data center, they managed to reduce their power consumption by 15%. Now, these are the world's most optimized data centers. There's nothing like as efficient as a Google data center, and they managed to tune that down by whatever it is, 10 or 15%. Imagine having AI applied to the global energy system, or the global transport system, or the global food production system, or the global water system, or the global climate change, or whatever it is. It's just staggering what could lie ahead of us. And it's very nice to think about the privacy implications of the 500 million privileged. But I think the opportunity is really in all of a sudden looking at the world from a completely different perspective.
Indeed, it's a dual and ambiguous nature of technology, right? Is obviously some things can hurt large populations of people, and other things can absolutely mobilize and elevate individuals who have never had access. You know, whether it's the blind being able to actually use more technology, or billions of people who don't have access to internet and network services the way that we do and take for granted every day. I want to save a little bit of time at the end for your questions, but I'm actually going to give my last question. I'm going to turn it around. So my question for you, panel, is what should I have already asked you? Or maybe put differently, what do you think people are not talking about enough when we think about the AI market?
Just kind of going, so I think that we are not talking about what we're talking about was privacy. I think that is still just because people are giving that away and not necessarily, it's like, hey, it's out the window, everyone's sharing everything. Not everyone is sharing everything, as Michael had indicated. And yes, there's uses that are good. And one of the things that I think that needs to be done is those individuals who don't, this generation that's coming up who's sharing everything, that put their lives online for everyone to see, don't understand that doesn't go away. That's going to be up there, that nearly forever. We need to make sure that their rights are being protected in terms of privacy as well. So, with the financial implications, we still have GRC issues, where governance, risk, and compliance. That is something that needs to be addressed, and I agree that we're not there yet. And a lot of the reason is because our technologies and our ability to do a lot of what we're doing is light years ahead, and the governance and the policy making and the compliance are light years behind because of the type of red tape that they have to go through. So that's just one comment I wanted to make on that. And I think another thing that Bill touched on was, that's your name, right, Bill? Yeah, okay, make sure. Was the jobs, the concern with the jobs. There are, I think it's dichotomous. There are two different groups who are saying two different things. One group of individuals is saying, this is a bad thing. We're going to be displacing a lot of people. And then there's another group saying, oh, we're actually going to free these people up to augment the skill set, and they can stop doing these menial tasks and focus on something different. I don't think we're going to be there yet within the next 5 or 10 years, but we are going to get there, and that's something that needs to be addressed now. And the reason is that 5 to 10 years now, you're saying, okay, we're going to take the people now and we're going to augment their skill set, or we're going to allow them to do something that they weren't able to do before. But these individuals may not necessarily have the skill set that is transferable to these new jobs that are going to be created when we no longer have to wait in the DMV line to register our vehicle or get a driver's license. And that is something that needs to be focused on, is the aspect of, what do we do with this? Is this a training issue? Is this a retraining issue? There's already a dearth of talent from our nice Stanford dropout and poacher about that. So, how are we going to fill this gap, and how are we going to deal with this workforce? Another kind of, to throw another iron in there is this going to be a new industrial revolution where we're going to be strengthening the infrastructures, so that's going to free up the people to actually work on and girding up the infrastructures that are currently a little, not necessarily unstable, but that need to be strengthened so that we can continue to advance at a fast pace.
That was great. And so I'm gonna bridge Carrie and Michael here. I hope I'm gonna try, because I think Michael's point, I think, is the big point. And I'm gonna end on the high side, on the optimistic side, on that what we're not talking enough about is the potential for these new technologies to address and make a dent in our grand challenges on this earth. And so we're getting glimmerings of hope. We've been getting glimmerings of hope for a long time, but with some good fortune and hard work by all these innovative entrepreneurs, we can make dents in a lot of these grand challenges, not only in our own country, but around the world. And at the end of the day, to the extent that we make a dent and we bring more people into the quote-unquote modern world, that we lift up the 6.5 billion that still need to be lifted up at some level, then we have added tremendously to the capacity and capability of this planet. Now, it does mean, however, there will be disruptions, as there was in the Industrial Revolution. There will be people whose jobs get transferred to someplace else, and whose jobs get eliminated. So you have this disruptive effect at the micro level of individuals, but at a macro level, you have a huge wealth creation. And so that is the ultimate grand challenge for us. As a society, can we capture that value and figure out a way to build the social contracts that enable us to maintain the coherence of our societies around this disruption. And unfortunately, we're sort of seeing it go in the wrong way, right? We're sort of seeing it going toward nationalism and divisiveness, as opposed to globalization, internationalism, and collaboration. But to be optimistic, you guys, the technologists, the innovators, will be the ones to create value, to create wealth, to bring more people into our society, and hopefully, net, that will result in good things.
Indeed. Please contribute if you'd like. No?
Far to follow on from that. So I think what we should be talking about, what you should have asked us, is how can we all become centaurs? So just to show that I'm really nuts. So 1997, 20 years ago this year, was obviously the famous year when Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov. And the thing that Garry Kasparov realized was that the best chess player is not human and is not a machine, but is actually a combination of a human and a machine. And the best chess players these days are called centaurs, and they're combinations of people and chess programs. And I think the question that we should be asking ourselves, how can we all become centaurs and augment ourselves with artificial intelligence? in our own various ways, maybe in our private life, with whatever, the next generation of Fitbits or whatever it is, but also in our corporate life, in our working life. How can we become better at what we do by using the various types of artificial intelligence that are available to us?
Great answer. Yes, please.
I do think that we should talk more about the future of work. I'm obviously an optimist since I'm building a startup, right? But I'm also a realist, and I do recognize that more automation will lead to decline in at least the low-skill jobs, right? So it's obvious in manufacturing. You may not visit the factory every day, but you do visit, Safeway and Target, and you see the decline in the number of cashiers. Do I think it's a dignified job for a smart human, even if their education is only high school level, to just scan your cereal boxes? No, but you can't just drop them off and leave them hanging. I think Jessica alluded to that. Carrie, sorry.
That's okay.
So I think we do have a duty to take care of workers that are getting displaced by automation, and every company that is doing automation should think about that. And then actually, as society, again, and I don't think we should leave this to the government either, is we do think we need to think about this concept of universal basic income. If at scale, asymptotically, the number of jobs available in every country will just shrink by, a huge percentage over the next 20, 30 years, then that idea should actually be studied and thought through, in my opinion.
Gosh, so many topics. We could go on. Do we have time for a question or two?
Up to you.
Let's go for it. Although I realize
People want to stay.
as long as you guys want to stay, although I realize we're standing in the way of you and refreshments. Questions from the audience? Please, in the back.
I did causal modeling that was developed in UCLA by Joseph Bird, and Carnegie Mellon has developed a lot of algorithms called the Tetrad system on this, but it has not come to industry level yet. But I was wondering that figuring out the causal relationships can really help AI in industries. Like the chatbots, for example, that can use causal relationship to see what kind of level of security you want.
So what's exactly the question? I'm
asking that do you think the causal modeling can be used in industry level soon?
She's asking if causal modeling can be used in industry level implementation. And she's specifically asking about chatbots. Right. I'm not touching chatbots.
Okay, here we go.
I think it's a great question, and I absolutely see a future for causal models in industry in particular, in those areas where correlation is not enough. And if somebody calculates the radiation dose that I receive for cancer treatment, I still want to have a causal model behind that. And there's a lot of places exactly like that, and there's a great area for application for those.
I think statistical correlation is not enough.
Don't say it quite so drastically, but
Let's go for another question. Right here? Yep.
My question is for Dia, actually. So you mentioned at the very beginning that you invested the first artificial intelligence company back in 1989, right? And later you invested in another artificial intelligence company. So I just wonder, in between, why there are not so many artificial intelligence companies that interest you?
Yeah, those are not the only two data points. They just represent represent the endpoints in multiple data in between. We made reference to it before that that AI, it was booming in the 80s. It was the future. It was, everything was going to happen, and pretty soon we were going to have the 5th generation computer, and everything would be autonomous. And it didn't quite happen. And so AI went through this nuclear winter. And no self-respecting entrepreneur or academic would actually use the term AI, right? Because AI was discredited. So natural language processing, that was okay. Machine learning was kind of your backdoor way of talking about AI without using the phrase AI. And then it sort of came back a little bit in the bubble, but not that much. And then, in the early 2000s with, CNNs and sort of this deep learning emergence, and all of a sudden we saw some real effects. So I've seen a lot I've been continuously interested. It's been very painful. But in the technologies and the evolutions of the technologies. And so I don't see today as being all of a sudden in the last year, there was not suddenly this emergence of a new technology that was going to transform the world. It just represents sort of the emergence and media credibility of this evolution of technologies over 60 years, I don't know. When do you consider the birth of AI? Turing, right? Alan Turing is the birth of AI, arguably. So it's been a long ramp, and not very steep ramp. It feels like today it's extremely steep, but my experience suggests that it's not as steep as it feels. But tons and tons of really exciting, interesting applications for it. So,
Okay, let's take one more. Go for it.
Are you pointing at me?
I said you, sorry.
Just to go back, previous question was about causal modeling, but I think it's not as scalable. I think the bigger question is explainability in AI. How are you going to verify that the AI is doing what it's supposed to be doing and it's not recognizing it in some weird way, and then when you actually put a car out there, it looks at the sunlight and decides that it's so I don't know, a left turn.
There are several proofs that have been developed. But this question that how do you know that the cause is a cause, really, and not just a...
Well, but it's tied to the explainability. What is the network picking up on?
Yeah.
Why is it making that decision? And in that case, a human can explain, okay, I am making this decision because this input's here. But the AI mostly is a black box, especially the scalable ones. So then you run into that, that same.
well, this is not my domain, but just to challenge slightly, we don't know that humans know, right? There's this whole field of neurolinguistic programming that says, right? You think you have the evidence that demonstrates for certain that it's a cause, but okay, somebody smarter than me needs to answer this question.
Like humans, an octopus, you can describe an octopus, right? You can draw an octopus.
Yeah.
You can't ask the AI, well, what do you expect in it? Even if it can recognize an octopus, you can't ask it to describe what do you expect in an octopus.
Yeah.
And that's the button.
I'll throw in on this because I actually just wrote an article about this. This is a huge issue, and one when I began looking at this space was sort of the glaring hole from so many perspectives, from an accountability perspective, from a governance perspective, from a legal perspective, from a disenfranchised perspective, from a is it an erroneous model perspective. There is not a single answer today. There are more and more developments in this space. We've seen a couple of different startups cropping up that are targeting just this, running algorithms on the algorithms. There's a few universities doing research on this. It remains a huge issue, and what I've found in my research is, depending on who you ask, some people think this is a non-issue, some people think this is the #1 issue. But from many standpoints, the ability to see into these neural networks is important. That said, can we fully explain our decisions? Sure, if it's something simple like an image or an octopus, perhaps. But when it comes to complex decision makings about abstract topics, humans are not so great at introspection. In fact, it's sort of ironic that we are demanding this of our machines based on, the brain. Anyway. Go for it. You've had your hand up.
Well, thank you. And this is more of a comment, not maybe a question, but there was not much discussed about the governance and the need for the regulation. And I don't think it's about necessarily this sort of a apocalyptic view of the world or the AI. It's going to be more about maybe you need perhaps a super AI to be able to not to regulate but to reinforce, right? The reinforcement body, I look at it as more of a probability of there is going to be perhaps that evil mind that is going to define a different optimization goal, and that optimization goal is going to be evil, right? And that AI is going to get to that optimization goal and it's going to destroy something in between, right? Yeah. So to be able to reinforce, even though if we have regulations, it's going to be beyond human, perhaps. You need a super AI that can really look at all the possibilities and block any sort of possible, probable kind of means or ways out into that optimization goal, right? That can be evil. The other thing is, if you look at the genetics and genomics, and this is again just another thought, if once AI gets to that point where it's really a platform where you can really bring in any sort of data and produce any sort of way to get to an optimal solution, maybe you can bring in human genes and genomics, right, and create this sort of a superhuman kind of optimized for something. And then, combine that with the next generation of AI and so on. So to me, it's really a probability. And I don't think we can just leave it to the morality or hoping that people are going to be moral and not to take it there. Because I think when it gets really right, then it can get to that point, right? And then maybe, AI will create a new form of AI and so on. So kind of referring here to the Ray Kurzweil's, singularity point. Yeah. But these are big questions.
Very big questions. Thank you for that comment. I think we're over time. Please join me in applauding the panel. Thank you, guys.